Nintendo 64 2001, my goodness. Well, they're still supporting games for the 64 as they're getting ready for the launch of the GameCube. That's going to come out later in 2001. But in the meantime, we still got some great games that came out for the 64 in 2001. We're going to look at a lot of them in this video. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here. I also make my own video games. I got the games for sale, the custom air fresheners I make. It's all available in my shop. Check out a link in the description below. And by watching, you are supporting. I appreciate it when you subscribe though, because that means you want to see more videos just like this, and I can keep pumping them out for you. Kicking off the year with Mega Man 64. Now, I was very curious to see what they could do with a Mega Man game in 3D. And this was the answer to that. It was more of a side story. It wasn't quite like Mega Man in 3D, but it was still Mega Man 64 in 3D. Did it have to be Mega Man? It didn't really even have to be Mega Man itself. It could have been anything else. I kind of liked the kind of blocky, I kind of liked the kind of anime-looking element to this Mega Man game. So if I took myself away from it saying, okay, so it's not exactly like the 3D classic Mega Man I was expecting, it's actually kind of fun. It's actually kind of a decent game. It's interesting anyway. You still shoot with your blaster and all that too, so they didn't make any qualms about it. It wasn't like a classic, like, hey, let's make Mega Man 3D. Let's just do Mega Man 64. So it's like, it's its own thing that you just gotta check out and be like, you know what? It just happens to be called Mega Man 64. You're walking around in a 3D universe, as you should be. I mean, it's, you know, Nintendo 64. Love the 3D for it. Paper Mario came out for the Nintendo 64 early in 2001. I remember when this game came out, I was like, this could work. This is just unique enough that it could work. And I remember seeing it on display somewhere where I was like, boy, this is something different. Let's take Mario and do something completely different with it. So it's paper, which has been done before. Parappa the Rapper looking very paper-like. Sure, why not? And then turn it into an RPG, that's the kicker. So it's like, okay, so it's not just a 2D paper Mario platformer, which honestly I would have preferred, but people do love their RPGs. Gotta love that. So let's make an RPG. It's not exactly Super Mario RPG, but maybe even some of those elements where you can hit the button for timing purposes. So it's not just I attack you, you attack me, we'll see what happens next. It keeps you interactive and it keeps you going too. And kind of fun that they would use like other elements in the game too. Again, a little bit like Mario RPG, but still with Paper Mario, having it be its own Paper Mario thing, which kicked off many other games in the Paper Mario series. But this is where it all started, on the Nintendo 64 back in 2001. Conker's Bad Fur Day rolls around. Boy, this game came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere, I shouldn't say that. It was surprising to me because when it finally did come out, I was like, this took a turn for the weirder, because for a while there, Conker was this very bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, quite literally, character on like what, Game Boy Color or something like that. And there was like, oh, we're gonna have a Conker game for the 64, and I thought it was gonna be another like a Banjo-Kazooie style game, you know, from Rare, the same company. It's like, okay, sure, we can do a Conker game. And then this game comes out with the rating it had, with the attitude it had, with the crassness that it had, with the bosses that it had. It was the attitude I think it needed to be a success. I don't think it would have been as popular as it is today if it wasn't for that, because it was still kind of during that late 90s. We're in the 2001 now, but there is still a little bit of that late 90s attitude that still kind of carried over a bit. So it was like the perfect little exclamation mark for a Nintendo 64 game, and for something exclusive to the 64. I could have seen this game on like the Dreamcast. I could have even seen this game on like the PlayStation, where you could go a little bit further because they're more aged, you know, those consoles, I think, were more for an older demographic than the Nintendo 64 was. So the Nintendo 64 gets something like that too, and you're like, ooh, wait a minute, what's going on with the 64? Where'd that come from? It's not bad. Aidyn Chronicles: The First Mage, a very in-depth RPG for the Nintendo 64. And it's another one of those late release games, so maybe kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes, but there is so much going on with this game. I think it looks really good for a 64 game. I gotta put that out there. The idea that it has like so many elements that you can upgrade, and your armor and stuff like that, and the potions you can use to do different things for you and your party in this game when you're you're playing this game, and the exploration involved makes it a very, very in-depth game, especially for the 64, especially during this time. So Aidyn Chronicles, I feel like it flies under the radar a lot of times when people are talking about games for the 64. But boy, this one's up there. We get Dr. Mario 64, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. I remember Dr. Mario. I'll play Dr. Mario for sure. It's funny because the cutscenes are also in that kind of paper mode, so it's almost like paper Dr. Mario, but not really paper Dr. Mario. It's Dr. Mario, and there's a story mode to this. Believe it or not. Not that there needs to be a story mode to this, it's Dr. Mario. But they give it a story mode to give you an idea to when you're playing the game versus the computer player or whatever, to, what do they call them, like the mega vitamins or something like that, or I don't remember. I was like, Dr. Mario with a story mode? What's the story? You just play, it's a puzzle game. But they gave it a story mode. And you can also just play Dr. Mario on it too. Very, very good game. It plays very well. It's Dr. Mario. You can't ruin it. It's the same Dr. Mario, really. Mario Party 3, we had 1 and 2, and now here's 3. There's more boards to choose from, more maps to choose from, more playable characters as well. Now you can play as Daisy. Is Waluigi in this one as well? I think so. I mean, it's funny because you play like the newest Mario Party Jamboree or whatever came out recently, and it's like there's, like 20 playable characters, but in the early days, there was like, 6 to 8. Now this one had 8, I believe. Very, very cool. Mario Party 3, it's a good one. The maps are okay, but it was a nice thing to tide you over until the Mario Party games for the GameCube came out later. We have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. This is another one of those games that came out on multiple consoles. It's not just for 64. I had it on PlayStation, had it on Dreamcast, whatever else. And very good game. I love the fact that it had the soundtrack as well. So it's a cartridge, but it had, like the licensed music. That was one of the great things about the Tony Hawk games. They're always just fun to play, and you can always play as more than just Tony Hawk too. I recognize a couple of them. I remember Steve Caballero as being another skater on my, like, the Search for Animal Chin VHS that I had that I watched so many times. And then like some of the other characters, like I've heard of Bucky Lasik. I've heard of, some of these other guys too. So it's nice because if you know Tony Hawk and you know the video games, it introduces you to these other skaters who are out there too. And this is for all of the games. So it's not just Tony Hawk. Yeah, you can play as Tony Hawk too, but it gives you that idea too. So very cool. And I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, it's more the same. It ain't broke. Someone's hip might be broke, or their wrist or something like that, because they don't know how to fall, but it's always it's always a fun time. Love the Tony Hawk games. We have Powerpuff Girls Chemical Extraction. Again, another one of those games that on a lot of people's worst 64 games lists, this one comes up a lot. It's another one of those, there's got to be a name for this. What's that name of the Power Stone fighter? It's like a room fighter, an environmental fighter. Like, it's not just a one-on-one 2D fighter. It's like you're in a room and you can move around and pick up items and throw them, and it does not play well. It does not, I mean, it looks all right because it's Powerpuff Girls. Powerpuff Girls was, the animation was pretty simple, and it's supposed to be. But man, it's also not fun at the end of the day. It's just kind of clunky, and it's just, you could do so much with a Powerpuff Girls game. Even if it was just like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. I mean, that's always the go-to, the tried and true. But, with games like Power Stone that were so popular. Was Power Stone when did Power Stone come out? Maybe it wasn't, well, it had to have been out by now. Because this game totally kind of rips that off. I don't know. Yeah, this game was interesting. It's on a lot of those, worst games for the 64 list for a reason. Razor Freestyle Scooter. This is that kid's game that if you wanted Tony Hawk, but your parents wouldn't get you Tony Hawk, they could get you this game. And it's a Razor scooter game that plays like a Tony Hawk game, where you can still go up the ramps and do these little tricks and everything. It's hard for me to say out loud the resurgence of the Razor scooter during this time. Remember fidget spinners? Like a few years ago? I say a few years ago, it was like, good lord, 6 or 7 years ago now. It was like that, but with Razor scooters. You would find Razor scooters everywhere. I remember my local 7-Eleven had Razor scooters for sale. I don't know why, but man, Razor scooters were everywhere and cheap. And I was like, well, we've had scooters growing up I don't know. I honestly don't know. But Razor scooters were a thing during the early 2000s, and why not make a video game out of it? So they did, and it plays like the Tony Hawk games, so there you go. And honestly, not a very long video today, because that's kind of it. I will throw in there, just for fun, in 2002, because I'm not going to give this game its own thing, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 comes out. So now we're into the next year. The GameCube has already been released, and we get Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 on the Nintendo 64. For the best of my knowledge, this is the final game released for the 64, is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. Finally, we can play as Bam Margera. So you play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. It plays like the other ones. The other ones are great. Love playing the Tony Hawk games. Still do today. But 3 finally rolls around, and there we go. We got Bam Margera, who of course I know best from Jackass. It's like, oh, he's a skater too? Cool. Oh, you can play as him in this game. Great. And hey, you know what? Works for me. I like Bam. There you go. Bam's cool. He was nice to me anyway, so there's that. And with that, my friend wraps up all of the years for the Nintendo 64. We've done all of them so far. We've also done all the years for NES and Super Nintendo. Thank you so much for watching. We have Genesis, we have TurboGrafx 16, we have Game Boy, we have Game Boy Advance. I can keep making these videos so long as people keep watching them, and apparently people like to watch them, so I got a lot of memories left. You know, we'll see. You know, until my older age sets in, I got to get my words out there somehow. So thank you much, and thank you for the support. Always appreciate you. Thank you much.